are there any other things in which you imagined that you have commonalities? Any ways in which people who have different points of view can find common ground?
I mean, probably there's tons of them. It's just that it's not going to be a super interesting conversation because it's not going to be a huge fight between Ricky and I, and it's not going to get tons of views on YouTube or whatever it might be, you know, because it's not, you know, we've had a huge change in our media ecosystem where news historically was not entertainment. I don't know how to make that make sense to a lot of like the younger people here, but it really was not. Historically, the place that these companies would make their money from was by putting on a sitcom after the news, and the news was just one thing that they would put out there. It was basically a public service. It was not a profit-making mechanism. But after the changes in the fair time rule, for example, which enabled a lot of opinion news networks like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News to become a thing, in the past, up until about, I think it was around the early 90s, networks were required to have an equal amount of time given to the conservative and the liberal in terms of a lot of these viewpoints and everything. But ever since the changing of that rule, it's driven a lot more polarization. But, you know, I think one thing that we agree on that I've, you know, just a random thing that I've been working on recently is that, you know, my father had a huge pain working through the VA over the past decade or so because he died of early onset Parkinson's and was still denied his benefits, even though he very likely got his Parkinson's from jet fuel exposure being a helicopter pilot in the Navy. And personally, I think it shouldn't be on veterans to explain why they are disabled to the federal government. The federal government should assume that basically all of them are fully disabled, and it should be the onus should be on the government to explain why they are not disabled in the first place when they've already sacrificed so much of their lives and the future of their families to help serve this country, as our government invests trillions of dollars into, frankly, what are mostly bullshit wars, sorry for the French, that never should have happened in the first place and are often driven by corporations that then buy off our corporations and fund our elections, including the military-industrial complex, which is ridiculously expensive and a whole nother conversation to have. But no, I would think expanding veterans healthcare is one thing that we can agree on. Probably, you know, having less partisan congressional districts so that we can have, you know, fairer maps that are drawn would be one thing that I would assume that we can agree on too. Along with, you know, more funding ideally for college campuses, because I think part of the problem that we've had is we told an entire generation to go to school, and we increased the amount of money that's available for them to go to school, but then we didn't increase the actual number of schools that was available for them to go to. So naturally, with supply and demand, you're going to have those schools raise their prices a lot of the time. And I think that we need the government to step in there and realize that this is a critical thing, not only for our democracy, but also for our economy, to keep it growing and, you know, invest in research and development, more scientific degrees and other STEM education, along with just liberal arts education as well. As much as I love, you know, aerospace engineers and mechanical engineers, I'm a history major. I think you were a history major too. Yep. We need to have a diversity of thought and invest in all of these programs at our schools and college campuses, and not just see it only as a profit-making mechanism.